Hello and welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to stroke a pen path with the brush tool. Now, this is actually incredibly cool for a couple of reasons. First, you can actually simulate pen pressure with the stroke. So if you don't have a pressure sensitive tablet, like I'm using this Wacom Intuos Pro Small here, no big deal. You can actually basically get the same look by stroking a path with a brush. And also, you can do so many cool things with the brush tool. You can make custom brushes that look all kinds of different ways. So in this video, we're gonna show you how to do it, and then you can get out there and play on your own and have a lot of fun, because I think this is actually one of my favorite features of the pen tool. All right, let's go ahead and jump into Photoshop. So here we are in Photoshop. Let's go ahead and take a look at our sample images. We're in Chapter 2, Section 7, and we've got a few PNGs here. So we've got, just go ahead and open these up. So we've got Allure, PNG, coffee.png, and strokepath.jpg. Now, you'll also notice this is this Bickham script. This is actually just a text file letting you know the font that we used for the Allure text. So if you guys have an Adobe CC subscription, that's going to be included in Typekit. Okay, so I put the link in there just so you know exactly where it is. That's all that is. All right, let's go ahead and open these up. And just in case you don't have that type or you just want to follow along without that, I included these PNGs also as well. So we have this Allure. We're going to make like a little fake ad here, Allure Coffee Company or something like that. Okay, so these PNGs you can totally use, or you can just use it with type. So we'll show you how to do both. So to start off with, we have a few different images here. So let's go ahead and use our Move tool. I'm going to hold Shift and click and drag from one image to another. There we go. So there's our Allure Coffee. And let's go ahead and close those out. I'm going to hit F for full screen. Now, I'm gonna make those invisible real quick, and we'll just use T for our type tool, and I'm gonna type in Allure. There we go. And let's go ahead and open our type tool. So if you wanna just create the type itself from scratch, we're gonna show you how to do that. It's obviously super easy. Let's go to Window and down to Character. So here we're just gonna type in Bickham. There we go. We're gonna use this Bickham script Pro 3 regular. Okay, we'll go ahead and turn that off. That was the all caps, so we're just going to turn that off. And we're just going to make our font size a bit larger. There we go. By a bit larger, I guess I mean way larger. All right. There we go. And we actually kind of maxed out on that size. But if you do max out, it's not a big deal. You can actually hit just Control or Command T, and you can just scale a text layer just like you would scale any other layer. Okay. Now, the spacing in between my letters right now is set to -10, which is just doing some weird stuff here. So I'm going to pop that back down to 0. There we go. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and make this a little bit smaller here. All right. So there we go. We're just creating this from scratch. And then we're going to do the same thing here down here. And let's just hold Shift. And I'm going to type in coffee. And then this we're just going to use Helvetica New. There we go. Let's just use Helvetica New regular. I'm going to all caps that, and we're going to change our spacing here to like 850. There we go. That's changed the spaces between each of these letters. And then our font size, let's go ahead and bring that way, way down. All right, so you can just click on that little font guy and drag it to the left there. All right, perfect. And let's pop that in there. Cool. So you can obviously recreate this with me, or you can just use the PNGs that I've included here, either one. All right, let's go ahead and change the font weight to light on that. Okay, now this starts off, it looks pretty good here. The only thing that I'm seeing is it's a little bit hard to read what's going on between the letters and the background. So anytime this is the case, if you have light letters, I recommend just popping like you can put a gradient in the background, or you can use levels. So we'll show you how to do both of those. So over top of our background, I'm just going to grab a levels adjustment layer here. And what I could do, a few things. I can take my white point and just kind of bring that down a little bit. Okay, and you can see it just makes the lightest area in your photo just a little bit darker. Okay, so this is a pretty good way to do it. It keeps you from having to just put black on your image, right? So let's go ahead and do that. And in this case, I'm just going to invert my layer mask, Control or Command I. Let's go to our gradient tool. So G for the gradient tool. You can also just click right here. And our gradient, we're going to choose the foreground to transparent gradient. Let's hit OK and use the linear. And basically, I'm just going to like click on the bottom and hold Shift and just go up to the top there. So what we're doing is just like, we use the levels adjustment layer, obviously, to like lower the brightness of our lights. And then I'm just using our gradient tool on our layer mask to just make it visible on the bottom. Okay, now we have both of these layers. Again, I'm just gonna use these actual type layers. I wanted to include these for you if you didn't have these fonts or couldn't find them or whatever it is. You guys can use the PNGs. The teaching is gonna be the same. Okay, now I want these both to be centered here. So I'm gonna hit Control or Command A. Okay, that's just gonna select my entire document. And now the cool thing is, let's just say, for instance, like if this was over here and this was over here, right? Just like mumbo jumbo or whatever. Let's hit Control or Command A, which selects my document itself. And then if I go to my Move tool, I can actually use my alignment options up here at the top. So you can see if I'm on a different tool, I won't see my alignment. So make sure you go to your Move tool, then you have your alignment options. Now, if you have a selection, automatically you're going to be aligning to that selection. So in this case, I've selected my whole document, so I'm going to be aligning to my whole document. So let's go ahead and just click on this vertical align center. There we go. And then the coffee will just vertical align that to center as well. Okay, there we go. Now we can just deselect. I can bring this allure right down there and then hold Control or Command, click on them both, and then drag that down there. All right, and maybe I want to bring my brights just a little bit darker. Okay, cool. So again, that's just a nice way to like have everything perfectly centered. You don't want to like, you really don't want to be like, oh, I think that's about center, right? Just, why would you do that? Just select everything and then pop it exactly center. That it's just gonna look better every time. So use those alignment controls. That's what they're there for, and it's just gonna help things look more professional. We're off to a pretty good start here. Now, let's go ahead and talk about stroking a pen path with a brush. And kind of what I want to do with all this, by the way, I'll just do a little sketch here. So let's just create a new layer here. I'm going to hit just B for my brush tool, and we'll just paint with a color we can see. So there we go. Now with this sketch, I just want to kind of come around here like allure and then do something like that. Obviously make it look like way better than this. There we go. Allure coffee. And we see these flourishes all the time, and you can kind of play around with that. So let's do, one like that, and let's create a new layer. We'll just create a different color here. And again, this is just for sketches here. So we could do something like this, kind of come around here and back over there, something like that. Okay, now obviously these look horrible, but that's what this lesson is on. We're gonna make it actually look good. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about stroking a pen path with a brush, because honestly, this is so cool. So just to show you guys what we're doing here, I'm gonna create a solid color fill. There we go, we'll just make this white, and we're gonna create a new layer, and I'm gonna hit P for the pen tool. So our pen, let's go ahead and just make sure this is just set to a path. We don't need to use a shape here. So we're going to use a path here, all right? And we'll just do a nice simple path, something like that looks pretty great. Okay, now over here in our paths dialog, you can see we have our work path, looks great. And if I right click here on the path, we can see right down here on the bottom, we have stroke path. Now fill path, I didn't make a whole section on this because that just fills it with a color, okay, cool, we filled it with the color. But the stroke path option, there we go. The stroke path option is actually a little bit more powerful. So that will actually take your current settings with your brush tool. So let's hit B for the brush tool, and you can see I'm painting with this green brush here, right? So if I right click on this layer and I go to stroke path, I have a few different options here. Now you can actually stroke with a bunch of different tools here. I've pretty much only found real use with the brush tool, but if you wanted to stroke up with the healing brush along a path, you could totally do that too, which I think is really cool. So I'm going to choose the brush. And again, this is just the current brush settings that we have. So we're going to continue to change these brush settings, and you're going to see we got some cool other options. So we're going to stroke this with the brush, and I'm going to click on simulate pressure. And what this is going to do is it's going to get larger or smaller based on the stroke path. So at the beginning, it's going to start off small, it's going to get larger, and then get smaller again. All right, so let's hit OK there. And you can kind of see it, but kind of not. So let's go back to our layers. All right, we're just going to actually click off our path, and we can see there. So this stroked this path with my brush tool. And you can see, again, it starts off small, gets a little bit larger, and then fades away. So really, really cool there. And because I was selected on a new layer, it just did that on a new layer. Now, let's just undo that real quick. I'm gonna just change my brush settings. We're gonna just do some work with our brush, and you're gonna see really how this kind of changes the way you can work in Photoshop, especially if you need to make something like really accurate and look like really nice and scripty, like calligraphy or something like that. So let's go to our brush settings. I'm gonna go to Window, down to Brush Settings. There we go. And here we're just gonna choose a few things. So our brush tip shape, let's go ahead and put our hardness all the way at 100, okay? And your spacing, I'm gonna just bring that up just a little bit for now so we can kind of see. So as I paint around, it kind of looks like this. All right, our shape dynamics, let's turn our size jitter all the way up. There we go. And we'll bring our minimum diameter all the way down. So we'll just have a bunch of different shapes there. Okay, bunch of different sizes of little dots. Okay, you can turn on scattering. There we go. So it's gonna scatter. All right, and I'm gonna turn the control to pen pressure, so it's gonna simulate that pen pressure also. There we go. So now we have just a regular brush and it's doing all kinds of really fun things there. Let's go ahead and turn off transfer, and there we go. That looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and I'm just gonna select all this on the layer, Control or Command A, and hit the delete key. And now we're just gonna go back to this exact same work path. I'm gonna right click and go to Stroke Path. And now, check it out. It basically adds all of those variations. So the scattering that we put in there, the shape dynamics, all of those variations are now built into this brush. So it's gonna start off really, really tiny. It's gonna get larger and larger. And as it gets larger, it's also going to scatter more. And then it's gonna get smaller and smaller. So you can do this for a lot of cool things. Like for instance, if you wanted to create like fairy dust that went along a particular path, you could do that for this. You could do hair around an animal if you were cutting an animal out of their background, or someone who's, some hair, things like that. So there are a ton of uses here. Okay, so now that we kind of get the idea, let's go ahead and start doing this in a way that actually makes sense for our image. Okay. So our work path here, I can just delete this. We'll just do a new path in a second. Okay, these layers, we can delete those too. And now I just want to we'll start off with our first sketch here. So let's hit P for the pen tool. And I'm going to start off, we'll show you a couple different variations of this. So let's just start off here. There we go. Going to kind of follow this E around and do something like this. So obviously this is like just way more nice and controlled than you're gonna get with just like, a sketch like this, right? All right, now that we have our pen path here, let's go ahead, I'm gonna hit Control or Command. We can start altering this a little bit, to make it look like it might actually, there we go, might actually fit with our font choice and everything like that. All right, let's bring this up here. So again, I'm just holding Control or Command. Let's just go ahead and zoom in. I want it to look like it's just kind of like flowing from this letter, okay? So just kind of working on our path to get it to that point. There we go. Let's just bring this back there. All right. And that looks pretty good. Let's just click off of there. It's still a little bit, kind of has a little bit of too much of an angle to it. Maybe we'll just bring this down a little bit more. There we go. Again, I just want it to look like really nice and smooth. And I'm gonna hold Control or Command. We'll just kind of bring that up there. Okay, cool. And you know what, let's just bring this out this way a little bit more too. So this is, again, just one of the really great things about pen paths is that you can continue to edit them. So you can see we're just getting more and more refined as I edit this path. It's just looking a lot better and more natural. All right, so that looks pretty good. So we have our path looking pretty good. Now what we want to do is I want to stroke this path in a way that makes it look like, we're going to start off small. It's going to get a little bit larger and then get smaller. I want it to kind of mimic what's going on here with our actual letters. So now that we have this path, let's just go ahead and create a new layer on this. And of course, I can just right click on this and I can say stroke path with my brush. And remember, we have that brush, right? So if you wanted something like that, you could have that. But let's just hit undo, and I'm gonna go back to my brush tool. Let's enter in some settings that actually will work for this. So in this case, I'm gonna turn scattering off. We don't need it, okay? My color here, I'm just gonna put to white, all right? Our shape dynamics, I don't need my size jitter. I don't need jitter in my size, but I do want my control set to pen pressure, and we're gonna bring our minimum diameter up just a little bit, okay? Because I don't want it to get to like 0. We want it to be fine, but not 0. Now our brush tip shape, let's turn our spacing. Basically, I'm gonna pull that like pretty much all the way down, and our hardness, we wanna be up there. Okay. Now, this is gonna take just a couple of tests to actually see what it looks like, because we can change our brush size and things like that. But let's go ahead and see what this looks like. So if I just paint with my regular brush tool, you'll see that's what it looks like right now, okay? So let's go ahead and see how this looks when I stroke this path. I'm gonna right click there, and we're gonna go to stroke path and hit okay. All right, and go ahead and get off of there. And actually that looks pretty dang good already. You can see we do have like a little bit of an angle change here. Let's just turn our letters off and see that's just what our path looks like, right? So we just made that path and then stroked it with the brush, and I just happened to like put it right above our text, which actually looks pretty good. Now I think the brush, the thickness here is just a little bit thicker there. So let's go ahead and bring our brush size a little bit smaller. So I just hit undo. We're gonna bring our brush size just a little bit smaller. You can use open, close brackets to do that. Let's go back to our path, and we're gonna just say stroke path again. There we go. And go ahead and click off there. And I think that actually looks really nice. Now, again, let's go ahead and just zoom in here, turn this off or on. And you can see kind of the reason I started down here is to try to help it like fade into, into the letters just a little bit more, right? Let's go ahead. I'm going to bring my minimum diameter just a tiny bit smaller. No, I actually like how it ends there. I think the end is nice. So let's just do another layer here. Now, if I just bring my, if I go to my shape dynamics and bring my minimum diameter smaller, I can stroke this path again. There we go. And you can see it just it's gonna really end at like a point there, okay? So that's a control of the minimum diameter. So I just created a couple layers. So we have this one where it ends kind of rounded, and this one ends at a point. I think the point is just a little bit too fine. Maybe this is a little bit too thick. Let's try to match what's going on here. So what we're gonna do is bring up our minimum diameter just a little bit. We'll go to 20% there. All right, I'll create another layer. See, we can just use the same path over and over again and continue to stroke this on new layers. So let's go ahead and stroke that path. There we go, click off of it, and there we go. I think we're actually looking really, really nice. All right, and you can see the great thing about this is it's very consistent. If I just turn my text off here, you can see it starts off small, it very smoothly builds to a larger diameter, and then gets smaller again. So it's extremely consistent, and that's what helps it just look a little bit more professional. All right, well, I think that actually looks really nice. Let's just turn this off and on, see how it integrates with our text. I think it's integrating really, really nicely. The only thing I think that it just looks like we have a tiny bit of like a little angle there. So let's go back to our paths and turn this on, okay? And then again, just hit P for the pen tool, and we're just gonna stretch this out just a little bit more. Okay, there we go. Let's just bring this down a little bit more here. Kind of like really just integrate really nicely with our text. Okay, and let's just create a new layer and then stroke it again. Right click, stroke path, and hit OK. There we go. That's just a little bit more smooth. So you can see we have a few different options here. That one came down a little bit more. That one's going up a little bit more. All right, and I think that actually looks really, really nice. So we have these other options that we made here. You can it kind of looks nice combining those, getting a little bit thicker there. No, it's a little bit, see that like kind of like looks like an angle there. It doesn't look as smooth as I'd like. So let's go ahead and just delete these other layers. We don't need them. Okay, there's my little sketch. So you can see obviously it looks way better than my little sketch. And let's go ahead and try our next sketch. All right, so I'm gonna right click on this and I'm gonna call this bottom flourish. Okay, now let's right click. I'm gonna make it green color so I know just to keep that, right? That's like, anytime I've like got something like this and I just wanna make sure, sometimes I'll use like red if I'm gonna throw it away or green if I'm gonna keep it. Really, it's just down to whatever workflow you wanna do for yourself. But in this case, because we just have a bunch of layers, they kind of all look the same. Like these top two layers are the PNGs. So honestly, it's probably a good idea to just group those together, call this PNG, and then I'm gonna right click and just say, make that red, because I'm not gonna use them. You know, I'm using these text layers. I put them in there, you know, just in case you wanted to do that. And then you could go ahead and group these, double click on there, call those sketch. All right, maybe we'll make those orange. All right, let's go ahead and group these. There we go, our background. There we go, just call this BG for background. We can make this a blue color. All right, and then our text. So you don't have to do this, but when you get to the point where you've got 15 or 20 layers and you're doing different things with each of the layers, it can be kind of nice to like group things together. So let's go ahead and group that together with itself. I'm gonna call this flourish, and let's just make this green too. So now, you know, just a second ago, it was pretty confusing what we had going in our layers. Now it's pretty obvious. Okay, so with our sketch, let's go ahead and turn off, you know, this sketch. We don't need that anymore. We're gonna open up our flourish. I'm gonna create a new layer here, and we're gonna choose a new pen path. Okay, so our path 1. And then this time, we're basically just gonna follow it around and try to do something like that. So let's go ahead. I'm gonna start kind of in here. There we go. Beautiful, something like that. And again, keep in mind that this is, you know, these pen paths can be changed at any time, right? All right, so there we go. That looks pretty good. Now our layers, let's go ahead and turn off our bottom flourish. Okay, and I'm gonna turn off our little sketch there too. We'll just go back to our paths and see, you know, obviously that doesn't look great right now. So not a big deal. That's what the pen tool is for. It gives you the ability to always edit your pen paths. And again, I'm gonna maybe try deleting that path right there, because deleting that point, because kind of the whole idea with the pen path is like, you want to use as few points as possible. Let's hold Alt or Option and just drag this out there on the bottom. All right, that's just kind of the way to ensure that you have the smoothest possible path available, is by using the fewest points. All right, so now I'm also, you can see I can bring this anywhere I want, but if I hold Shift, it's going to restrict me to just horizontal or 45 degrees or vertical. So I'm going to hold Shift and kind of bring this out there. And then I'm also, you know, bringing these out by holding Shift. And then I'm also going to bring this out by holding Shift as well. So hopefully what we get is like a fairly well balanced like little arch right around there. And that's starting to look pretty good. Let's go ahead back in here now. Let's hold Control or Command. Again, I'll hold Shift here as well. Let's just bring this up a little bit. Let's do the same thing here. I'm going to hold Shift on this little arch there and just see if we can get kind of the whole thing. There we go. Kind of like feed into place naturally. There we go. This one, it might not make sense to have Shift. All right. There we go. Let's just bring that back down a little bit. Cool. So you can see I'm just kind of using this pen path I'm trying to basically create something that just looks like it's flowing seamlessly from inside of the text to outside of the text. That's kind of the idea there. All right, well, let's see how that looks. So basically, we're gonna go back to our layers. We have our flourish layer. I'm just on a new layer here, okay? So whatever you stroke your path on, it's just gonna be on that new layer. Let's go back to our paths. I'm gonna right click, and we're gonna say stroke path. Same brush that we used last time. Let's click off of there and see how that looks. So here we go. The allure kind of comes up. Yeah, I think that actually looks pretty nice. Now, let's just try a different version here where it doesn't do this like little loop-de-loop thing. Maybe it just comes straight from that. So let's create a new layer in there. This pen path, I'm just going to duplicate. So click and drag this to the new path icon. Okay. I'm going to say L no loop. That's going to be the name of that. L loop. It's going to be the name of that path. And this is going to be bottom. Okay. So this L no loop, let's just make that invisible. P for the pen tool. Now, if we want to get rid of this little loop, it's super easy to do, right? Just hover over any of these points, and I'm just going to click there. It's going to minus it out, minus that one out. There we go. And we'll just bring this. There we go. Bring that right to about there. All right, there we go. All right. Now what I'm looking for here is basically, I want this to look like a natural continuation of this L. Let's go ahead and bring this down. We're gonna bring that up. Now I know the L kind of like loops around, but I can just layer mask that out. That's not a problem at all. All right. Cool. Well, that looks pretty nice. Let's go ahead and see how that looks there once we actually get this in. Okay. So again, let's just right click. I'm going to stroke this path. Let's just be sure that I'm on that blank layer. And I am. So let's right click here. We're going to go to stroke path and hit OK. All right, cool. It does look like it kind of flattens out a little bit there. So let's go ahead and just make sure that it, looks like it's got a little bit of an arch to it. There we go. All right, let's just bring this out a little bit more, give it a little bit more curvature. All right. And that's looking pretty good. I'm just going to bring this in as well, just on that side. So, again, just kind of looking at the path itself. All right, I think that looks pretty good. So, let's, again, just make sure that we're on a new blank layer. There we go. We'll go to our paths, right-click, go to stroke to that path. All right, looks pretty good. And now we just go back to our layers, okay? And I can go to my text layer, this Allure Coffee here. I'll just pop a layer mask on this and then just paint black with my layer, just paint black on my layer mask just right here. There we go until, whoops. Okay, there we go until it basically integrates with my text. And in this case, you can see it's integrating pretty nicely. So there we go. Now we have Allure Coffee and it just kind of strokes right around there. So we've created a few different versions. Yeah, I think this is just a little bit distracting how that goes. So started off with our, with our sketches. Until you actually get it in there, you never really know how it's going to look. So we started, we added this one, we have the bottom, and we have this one. And the nice thing is just, they're super smooth, they're really nice, and they get larger and smaller very gradually, which just makes the whole thing look a little bit more professional. Now let's go ahead and say we're going to keep with that one. We'll just bring our coffee up just a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is, because we have our flourish here and we have our text here, let's just say we're going to keep this, and this is going to be our logo. I'm going to hit Control or Command. We're just going to minus that out. Let's hit Control or Command and select both our flourish and our text. I'm gonna right click and go to convert to smart object. And that just takes all those layers and pops it into a smart object, which is now really great because I can resize it. For instance, like if I can make it really small, then I can make it large again. We won't lose any resolution. Smart objects are just the best. So if you've never used a smart object and just want some insight with smart objects, we just released a great tutorial called How to Master Smart Objects in Photoshop. I highly recommend checking it out. So basically we just made all that a smart object. And now the cool thing about this smart object is we can just like save this smart object out as a PSD on its own, and then you basically just have a logo that you can use on any image. So I think this actually looks pretty good. There we go. And just a little bit of darkness in there. I'm gonna hit F for full screen, and then Command 0 to just size that accordingly. And there we go. We've got our little logo for Allure Coffee. Well, there we have it. Using the pen tool and stroking that with a brush, I just think it's one of the coolest things you can do in Photoshop. It really opens you up because creating something like this and having it look this precise is, it's very hard to impossible, basically doing it any other way. So now that you can do this, you can open that up and it'll help you with your graphic design work, logo work, all kinds of really fun things. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this section. We'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.